In far eastern Essos, people believe that the long night was caused by the blood betrayal, in which the Bloodstone Emperor murdered and usurped his older sister, the Amethyst Empress. In groundbreaking work, Lucifer Means Lightbringer, or LML, has equated the blood betrayal with Azor Ahai's stabbing of his wife Nissa Nissa. Thus, Azor Ahai is misremembered as the hero who ended the long night, when in fact he devilishly started it. In this essay, I explain that Azor Ahai probably killed more than just his wife in the blood betrayal. He killed her child as well. Part 1. Aemon the Dragon Knight and Simeon's Star Eyes. We can learn about the ancient blood betrayal by finding modern analogues of it. Whatever happens in the modern analogues provides clues about what happened in the ancient event. But how do we know when something is a modern analogue of the blood betrayal? One way is for the canon to come right out and say it. We are told that King Daeron I Targaryen was murdered under a peace banner in, quote, a bloody betrayal, end quote. Daeron, the young dragon, is a lot like Robb Stark, the young wolf, and Robb even pretended to be Daeron when he sparred with Jon Snow at Winterfell in his youth. Clearly, Robb's own murder at the Red Wedding is an incredibly important modern blood betrayal. I'll discuss that later, but first we can learn a lot from the bloody betrayal that claimed Daeron. Daeron's most famous Kingsguard member was Aemon Targaryen, the Dragon Knight, who stood by Daeron's side under the peace banner. Aemon couldn't save Daeron, but he did, quote, cut down two of the betrayers. Aemon's status as a Dragon Knight is a possible echo of Azor Ahai, who was likely a dragon-riding knight from the great Empire of the Dawn. What the modern Dragon Knight, Aemon, did during this modern bloody betrayal may shed light on what the ancient Dragon Knight, Azor Ahai, did during the ancient blood betrayal. And what Aemon did was to cut down two people. Let's hold that thought, cutting down two people, for just a couple of paragraphs before we return to it. Wyman Manderley once said to Davos Seaworth, quote, not every man has it in him to be Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight or Simeon Star Eyes. Wyman is telling Davos that Davos isn't heroic like Aemon or Simeon, just as Davos once told himself that he isn't heroic like Azor Ahai. This device connects Azor Ahai, Davos isn't like him, with Aemon and Simeon, Davos isn't like them. Perhaps the point is to suggest that Aemon and Simeon represent Azor Ahai. What they do is what he did. Indeed, Simeon has substantial symbolism that links him to Night's King, whom many of us believe Azor Ahai became. Simeon's name is Star Eyes, and he had sapphires, which are blue, for eyes. This means that he had blue star eyes just like the others, who have eyes like blue stars. And there are several other reasons to think of Night's King when we see Simeon. 1. Simeon visited the Night Fort, the castle where Night's King ruled. 2. Samwell Tarly lists Simeon alongside Night's King as an example of an ancient figure. 3. Simeon lived in the era of Night's King. And 4. Simeon was blind, which relates to greensight, a core feature of Night's King. Now we come to the point. Way back in the first book, Old Nan said that Simeon Star Eyes, quote, had a long staff with blades at both ends, and he could spin it in his hands and chop two men at once. Well then, one of our Azor Ahai figures, Aemon, cut down two men at a bloody betrayal, and another one of our Azor Ahai figures, Simeon, chopped down two men at once. Wyman Manderley's comment to Davos prompts us to connect Aemon, Simeon, and Azor Ahai, and now we know that Aemon did something at a bloody betrayal that Simeon also did. Maybe Azor Ahai did that thing at a bloody betrayal too. What exactly is that thing? Aemon and Simeon each killed two people, which could mean that Azor Ahai killed two people, Nissa Nissa and someone else. And cutting down and chopping down are what people do to trees. The weirwood trees, which grant green sight, are the most important source of magical or supernatural power in A Song of Ice and Fire. When Azor Ahai became Night's King and performed his catastrophic sorcery, he needed the power of the weirwood trees to do it. Getting that power probably required blood sacrifice, since we hear many times of blood sacrifices to the weirwood trees. So we should consider it a serious possibility that Azor Ahai's murderous deed was such a sacrifice. Let's make a working hypothesis that, in the blood betrayal, Azor Ahai killed two people. To test the hypothesis, we'll need to look for examples where two people are killed at once, and see what those examples tell us. Part 2. Parent and child, empress and heir. When two people are killed together in A Song of Ice and Fire, it's often a parent and a child, and in particular a king and his heir. Consider this extraordinary sentence from the world of Ice and Fire. Quote, Lancel IV is said to have beheaded the iron-born king, Harold Halfdrown, and his heir with a single stroke of the Valyrian steel greatsword Brightroar at the Battle of Land's Point. He later died in battle at Red Lake whilst attempting to invade the Reach. End quote. This sentence packs many relevant allusions into a short space. For starters, this is the first of several examples we'll discuss in which a king and his heir are killed together. The prevalence of such examples may suggest that the Amethyst Empress and her heir were killed together at the blood betrayal. If so, we'd want to see more clues that Lancel IV's act had something to do with Azor Ahai. And that's exactly what we get. Using, quote, a single stroke to kill two people is the signature move of Simeon Star Eyes, an Azor Ahai or Night's King figure. The term Land's Point refers to Land the Clever, another Azor Ahai figure. Some people believe that Simeon was literally Azor Ahai. Others, including me, believe that Lan was literally Azor Ahai. Valyrian steel signifies the ancient dragon riders now called Valyrians, who actually predated the settlement of the place named Valyria and originally came to Westeros before the Long Night from the Great Empire of the Dawn. Azor Ahai was one of them. Invading the Reach is what Azor Ahai is believed to have done at Battle Isle, where he and his dragons probably fought the Hightowers and others. Hat tip to LML, as always. Red Lake is where Brandon of the Bloody Blade, the earliest Stark mentioned in the books, and a very possible Azor Ahai figure in his own right, is believed to have killed and or impregnated, depending on one's interpretation, so many children of the forest as to change the lake's color from blue to red. So we're practically being begged to connect Lancel IV's killing of a king and his heir with something Azor Ahai did. Let's turn to our second example of a double killing that involves a father and son. In A Dance with Dragons, the chapter Jon 1 is crammed full of references to the blood betrayal. Here's the passage most relevant to our current discussion. Quote, 2 kings to wake the dragon, the father first, and then the son, so both die kings. The words had been murmured by one of the queen's men as Maester Aemon had cleaned his wounds. Jon had tried to dismiss them as his fever talking. Aemon had demurred. There is power in king's blood, the old Maester had warned, and better men than Stannis have done worse things than this. The king can be harsh and unforgiving, aye, but a babe still on the breast, only a monster would give a living child to the flames. Just like the previous passage we discussed about Lancel IV, this one concerns killing a king and his son at the same time. Killing a king is like the bloody betrayal in which Darren I was killed, and like the blood betrayal in which the Amethyst Empress was killed. If the second victim was the Empress's child, then the blood betrayal would involve killing a ruler and her heir. That's what we're seeing in these examples. Moreover, this dialogue between Jon Snow and Maester Aemon is specifically about killing a ruler and his heir as a blood sacrifice. Simeon and Aemon the Dragon Knight were said to cut down or chop down 2 people, and my guess is that such tree language signifies killing people as a sacrifice to the weirwood trees. If indeed the blood betrayal involved killing a queen and her heir as a blood sacrifice, this passage with Jon Snow would capture it almost perfectly. It's even possible that Maester Aemon's presence in the exchange is a nod to the fact that GRRM has used his namesake, Aemon the Dragon Knight, in references to Azor Ahai and the blood betrayal. There's also the possibility, which is similarly speculative but intriguing to me, that Azor Ahai is being referenced by the words one of the Queen's men. That recalls a theory of Archmaester Periston, whose theories about ancient dragon riders in Westeros are more accurate than anyone else's. That Lan the Clever may have started out as, quote, a retainer of some sort, perhaps a household guard who impregnated his lordship's daughter and thereby persuaded her father to give him the girl's hand in marriage, end quote. If Lan/Azor Ahai was a queen's guard to the Amethyst Empress and impregnated her so as to get her to marry him, then he would be one of the queen's men, just like the man in this passage who talked about killing a king and his baby as a blood sacrifice. Indeed, notice that in the very similar previous passage we discussed, the killer of the king and his heir was named Lancel, which evokes not only Lan the Clever but also Lancel Lannister from the main plot, a queen's man who sleeps with his queen. In any event, examples abound of kings and their heirs being killed together. Here's something Khal Drogo did way back in A Game of Thrones. Quote, "He slew 2 Khals this day, Khal Ogo first and then the son Fogo, who became Khal when Ogo fell." End quote. Killing a king and his child at the same time is enough of a recurring theme that it wouldn't be surprising if the blood betrayal involved killing a queen and her child at the same time. Yet another example of the combined deaths of a parent and child is found at White Tree. There, Jon Snow discovers 2 burned skulls, one larger than the other, in the mouth of a massive weirwood tree. It's fair to speculate that the smaller skull may have belonged to a child of the person with the larger skull. We can't know what happened, but the image evokes a possible blood sacrifice of parent and child to a weirwood tree. The same act I suspect is being referenced by chopping down or cutting down 2 people at once in the blood betrayal. Since we're talking about blood sacrifice and about the deaths of a parent and a child together, we need to acknowledge what happened to Shireen and Selyse Baratheon on the TV show. The show isn't canon, but it can provide clues about the books. In this case, a queen and her daughter die because of a blood sacrifice, perpetrated by a supposedly usurping king, like the Bloodstone Emperor, whose murderous act is a betrayal of his victimized blood relative. The daughter of the queen and usurping king is sacrificed by burning, like the child at White Tree. Selyse kills herself, so it's not a double killing in the manner of Simeon Stareyes, but it still has almost all the features of the sort of thing we've been analyzing. If this happens in the books, it will be a clue that the blood betrayal may have involved blood sacrifice and the death of a royal mother and daughter. Part 3. 2 Children. Let's take stock of where we are. We were prompted by a modern bloody betrayal and by lines about Simeon Stareyes and Aemon the Dragon Knight to look for examples in which 2 people are killed at once. And we found a bunch of examples that involved killing a king and his heir, an additional example of sacrificing a parent and child, and a TV show example of sacrificing a princess such that the queen also died. But there are other examples, including prominent ones in the main plot, in which the 2 people who get killed together are children, siblings, or in one case, first cousins. Theon kills 2 miller's boys while he is betraying House Stark. He tries to justify his double child murder by claiming that, quote, "it was blood for blood besides, 2 sons of Eddard Stark to pay for Roderick and Meryn," who are Balon's sons. So we have a killing of 2 brothers that is said, albeit preposterously, to be done in vengeance for another killing of 2 brothers. Rickard Karstark also murders 2 boys at once. The cousins Willem Lannister and Tion Frey in a betrayal of Robb Stark. Rickard did it to avenge the death of his 2 sons, 2 brothers who were killed by Jaime Lannister in battle. Another killer of 2 siblings is Tywin Lannister, who ordered the murder of Princess Elia Martell's boy and girl. Tywin did this while betraying and deposing the Mad King, a usurpation like the blood betrayal. Ross Miller's essential essay marks Tywin as fitting the archetype of Lan the Clever, an Azor Ahai figure, in this instance. Ned Stark calls Tywin, quote, "clever," for placing the children's bodies in crimson cloaks to conceal their blood. Tywin's and Theon's child killings were carried out by surrogates like Gregor Clegane and Ramsay Snow. Since Gregor and Ramsay are dark solar figures in LML's parlance, representations of the Bloodstone Emperor, this fits right in. That's 4 different killings of 2 siblings, and 1 killing of 2 first cousins. Theon's act, Rickard's act, Tywin's act, Jaime's act, and the killing of Roderick and Meryn Greyjoy. The 3 most important of those examples, the murders committed by Theon, Rickard, and Tywin, are betrayals. So what's going on here? If Azor Ahai cut down 2 people at once, was it a queen and her heir, or 2 siblings? To make our best guess, let's look again at the above examples a bit more closely. Tywin's and Theon's killings involved not just the children, but also their mother, a third person. This means that in some respects, they don't fit our model of 2 people being killed at once, and thus may not be analogous to the blood betrayal. However, in both cases, the focus is squarely on the 2 child victims, not on the 3 victims in total. Theon showcases the bodies of fake Bran and fake Rickon, while leaving their mother's death unannounced. Tywin does exactly the same thing. I suspect the point is that these examples are telling us something about the blood betrayal, but that they don't mirror it as closely as do the above examples of a king and an heir being killed together. What's important about these examples is that they hit us over the head with the concept of there being two children involved. That reveals the key point if one considers another commonality among these examples. In all 5 cases, a son survives. The invaders of Pike killed 2 of Balon's children, but Theon survived. Jaime killed 2 of Rickard's children, but Harrion survived. Theon killed the 2 Miller's boys, but the real Bran and Rickon survived. Rickard killed Willem Lannister and his cousin, but Willem's twin brother Martin survived. Tywin killed 2 of Rhaegar's children, but Jon Snow survived. If these double killings symbolize the blood betrayal, then a son probably survived it. Part 5. The Red Wedding. We aren't told anything directly about the ancient blood betrayal except that it involved usurping and killing the Amethyst Empress. But we're told something about the modern bloody betrayal that killed King Daeron I. The king received an offer to meet under a peace banner, and when he trusted those who made the offer, they betrayed and murdered him in a setting that supposedly guaranteed safety. The bloody betrayal of Daeron sounds an awful lot like the Red Wedding, which is also a bloody betrayal. At the Red Wedding, countless people die, but the 2 most important deaths are a mother, Catelyn, and her son, Robb. This would equate with a mother, the Amethyst Empress, and her son or daughter dying at the blood betrayal, although at the Red Wedding the ruler is the child rather than the parent. If you follow the work of LML, you know that the blood betrayal precipitated the Long Night by creating a natural disaster in which the Fire Moon was destroyed. Catelyn and Robb Stark, both of whom are redheads, kissed by fire, are Fire Moon figures. Their deaths symbolize the Fire Moon's death, and thus the Red Wedding symbolizes the blood betrayal. So the fact that not just the king, but also one other member of his close family was killed at the Red Wedding strongly supports our hypothesis that one of the Amethyst Empress's close relatives was killed along with the Empress herself. And as in the examples above involving 2 children, several Stark siblings are still alive after the Red Wedding. In my view, we're being told that Azor Ahai killed the Amethyst Empress and her heir at the blood betrayal, but that the heir's siblings survived. If so, that surviving child presumably grew up to oppose Night's King, since we've seen so many examples of sons fighting their fathers. Tyrion's killing of Tywin is the biggest one in the main plot. Part 6. Cronus, Helen, and the twins. My guess about what happened. This essay should probably end right here. We've gone where the evidence leads, and we need go no further. But I have a guess about the other details of what happened, and just in case you're curious, I'm going to tell it to you. If I were a betting man, I might be willing to wager some money that the picture I've painted so far is accurate, but I wouldn't wager anything on what I'm about to predict. It's a guess, nothing more. I suspect that Nissa Nissa was pregnant with twins, and that Azor Ahai cut her open in front of a weirwood tree, killing her and one of her babies as a blood sacrifice. Maybe he even fed the baby to his dragon, or ate the baby himself. But perhaps he expected her to have only one baby in her womb, so the other twin went overlooked. One way or another, that surviving twin baby was rescued and then grew up to oppose Night's King, whom Azor Ahai had morphed into. A less likely possibility is that Nissa Nissa had triplets, and Azor Ahai killed 2 of them but missed the third. Why do I think this? Well, there are clues pointing in that direction, although I recognize they aren't nearly as solid as the ones in our previous discussion. I'll explain them now so you can judge for yourself. One piece of evidence is the location where the Red Wedding happens, the twins. Since the Red Wedding reflects the blood betrayal, naming its location the Twins would be a wonderful clue about the ancient event. And of course, twins are everywhere in the story, from leading characters like Jaime and Cersei to the most obscure people. One possible explanation for why twins are emphasized so much is that a pair of ancient twins played a role in the world's near destruction and ultimate salvation. As Crowfoot's daughter pointed out to me, Nissa Nissa may well have been a Helen of Troy figure. There's a good chance that Azor Ahai brought his ships to invade Westeros with the goal of marrying her or getting her back. Indeed, several characters with names like Helen have life stories with major references to Nissa Nissa and Azor Ahai. 2 signature examples are the Targaryen women named Helena and Elena. Both of them gave birth to twins, and Elena's were bastard twins, one of whom was called Jon. Helena, for her part, died being impaled like Nissa Nissa. and one of her twins was murdered in a war to usurp a queen, whereas the other survived and was rescued. Moreover, the themes of fire and flesh-eating are bound up with blood sacrifice and with parents and children. We see it at White Tree, where a parent-sized head and a child-sized head were burned and placed in the maw of a weirwood tree. Maw is defined by the dictionary as the mouth, throat, or gullet of an animal, especially a carnivorous animal. And we see it when Dario brings Danny the heads of his fellow Stormcrow captains, laying them down in a manner that clearly references how Tywin, another land figure like Dario, laid down the bodies of Elya's two children. Dario had betrayed those two men, and Danny's dragons roast and eat their severed heads, bite by bloody bite. That's a quote, bite by bloody bite. As we know from an efficient two-word phrase that connects burning with eating, fire consumes. In addition, Old Nan says that the Titan of Braavos, who is an Azor Ahai archetype, eats, quote, the juicy pink flesh of little highborn girls. The baby daughter of an empress would be highborn indeed. In Greek mythology, Cronus was a Titan who ruled the world with a sickle that was often called a harp. Titan, sickle, and harp are all connected with Azor Ahai in A Song of Ice and Fire. Cronus ate his first 5 baby children, but his 6th child, Zeus, was rescued and then grew up to defeat him. Maybe this is just a coincidence, but when the Starks find the direwolves in one of the canonical scenes in A Song of Ice and Fire, Jon Snow rescues Ghost, the 6th wolf baby, who had gone unnoticed. That wolf baby represents, and to a degree is, Jon Snow, who was rescued as a baby himself and is likely to battle Night's King and the others. GRRM wrote a letter to his publisher that referred to the others as the Neverborn. This is highly reminiscent of Shakespeare's Macbeth, which we know is a major influence because it's depicted literally in the Wayward Bride chapter of A Dance with Dragons, where the trees attack Yara and her men. Macbeth, according to prophecy, can't be killed by anyone born of a woman, but Macduff kills him because Macduff had been ripped from his mother's womb rather than born from it. That would be just like my image of the blood betrayal, in which a mother's womb was opened before the babies were born, but one baby survived and grew up to avenge his mother's death. Indeed, Bran's vision of a pregnant woman asking her unborn child to avenge her is another echo of this scenario. In the 8th episode of the 1976 BBC television series I, Claudius, the Roman Emperor Caligula is depicted as marrying his sister Drusilla. Fearing that her child would surpass him, Caligula rips the fetus from his sister-wife's womb and eats it. Maybe GRRM saw that and thought, Eureka! Part 7, Conclusion. I suspect the Long Night was started by the blood betrayal in which Azor Ahai tried to kill the unborn or just-born twin babies of Nissa Nissa, the Amethyst Empress. One of the twins, or perhaps even a triplet, was rescued. Nissa Nissa died, permanently or impermanently. Maybe Azor Ahai burned and ate the twin he killed, or else fed him or her to his dragon. At a minimum, I think we can make a solid guess that Nissa Nissa was not the only one killed at the blood betrayal. She probably had a child who was killed there, and another child who survived.